Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's the News? This week we have AI stirring political controversy, early whispers about the 2028 presidential election race, new data showing how Americans really feel about each other, policy shifts, and some very uniquely Israeli innovations during wartime. Please like, share, and comment. Let's get into it. So, we're starting off with Grok. For those who may be unfamiliar with Grok, it's an AI chatbot created by Elon Musk's company xAI. Apparently, this past week, Grok got his own X account, and an X user then requested that Grok make an extremely vulgar roast. So Grok's response, quote, Donald Trump, that orange tinted blowhard with hair like an exploded squirrel and a mouth that shits more lies than a backed up sewer. Grok continued. Tiny hands flailing while he bankrupts everything he touches, stiffs workers, and brags about grabbing pussy like it's his God given right. The bloated ego on steroids who turned politics into a reality TV dumpster fire, walls unpaid, deals fake, and followers still slurping his cult juice. What a fucking circus clown emperor. Grok has been marketed as an AI system that answers questions and verifies claims in real time, much like other AI. And it's also directly integrated into X. Grok has also been described as less constrained, more willing to dialogue, and less filtered. Now, this post about Trump in particular has drawn mixed reactions. Some people support the fact that Grok is so openly speaking critically about a current sitting president, while others question whether an AI system should be engaging in such political commentary. Elon Musk has previously stated that Grok was intended to prioritize truth seeking and humor, even if it is controversial. If we remember, Trump and Elon's relationship started out seemingly well. They seemed to be quite close at one point during the end of the campaign and the beginning of Trump's term. And of course, that's when all the Tesla drivers got their I got this car before I knew Elon was crazy and anti Elon Tesla Club stickers. And honestly, I can't blame those people because at that time, so many people's Tessies were being absolutely destroyed. Since all the drama, Trump and Elon's relationship has been relatively under the radar. I personally believe that what's left unsaid is more important than what's being said. I also don't personally believe that Elon is against Trump. And people can argue, well, Elon owns the company, but that doesn't mean that he has his hands on everything. And I would agree with that. But something like this, he definitely knew about. And the question I have is, why was he okay with this being released? I don't know what these things are even called anymore. It used to be called a tweet or whatever. So, whatever the new X version of that is, why was it allowed to be released? Speaking of candidates who have been harshly criticized, Kamala Harris is now receiving a lot of attention because she may be the 2028 presidential contender. She recently topped a poll of potential Democratic primary candidates, followed by yours truly, Gavin Newsom. From immigration and crime to education and policy, it seems that many voters, as usual, favor centrist positions over rigid ones. Kamala has remained competitive in early polling, which is why it seems she may be coming back in a few short years. Since her loss to Daddy Trump, she wrote a memoir, she's hosted a book tour, and she's continually spoken with Democratic audiences. When asked specifically about another run, she's remained vague and noncommittal while not completely ruling it out. I mentioned a few episodes back that this is exactly why they decided to throw Tim Walz under the bus. Because if Kamala does actually decide to run again, we would need some sort of reason that could be relatively believable as to why she lost the first time. Again, both she and Gavin have simultaneously played a significant role in attempting to turn California into a trash heap and, more embarrassingly, into a joke. Since its inception, California was the place to be if you wanted a brighter future, if you wanted to be someone bigger than where you came from, if you wanted to find yourself in an adventure. That's not even mentioning the beautiful landscape and incredible weather. Since Kamala and Gavin, California has turned into one of the dirtiest places you could ever imagine. I remember when I first went to Hollywood to see the stars in 2016, the streets were absolutely disgusting. Garbage, awful infrastructure, the streets are horrific, vandalism, and now it's 10 years later. Downtown LA is also no longer the place to be, despite trying to make a comeback during and after COVID. There's so much homelessness downtown specifically, it's hard to walk anywhere. And it's not to say that some people aren't dealing with mental illness, and these people should be in facilities where they can receive proper care. But there are a lot of homeless people in California that are homeless because of all of the cushy benefits they receive. And as stated before, it's absolutely disgusting on most Los Angeles streets. One day a while back, I looked up and I realized there are barely any trash cans around. And people nowadays are so uncivilized that they just throw their trash on the ground wherever they are, as if the maid they don't have is following them to pick it up. Los Angeles barely having trash cans is completely intentional. It would help if the barbarians that call themselves Angelinos would begin to behave with some integrity and hold their trash. I have absolutely no idea when throwing trash out of your window while you're driving and dropping trash while you're walking became normal. But back to the initial point. In a few years, let's pray that we don't see Harris Newsom 28 bumper stickers everywhere. Now, an interesting poll has come out in regards to the human race. A recent study found that 53% of adults in the United States believe that the other adults in America have bad morals and ethics. Trust in other people within society is an important factor in order for that society to thrive. When people are skeptical of each other, it has a huge impact on social cohesion. The study also found that Americans are more likely than other people from other countries to question their fellow countrymen. The study also showed that Democrats and Democrat leaning individuals are more likely than Republicans or Republican leaning individuals to rate fellow Americans as morally and ethically bad. However, both parties have rising numbers of calling the other immoral. We're all familiar with the phrase divide and conquer, yet somehow we've all been led down this path of being divided. What do we truly expect to happen next? I've mentioned this before, but there's something to be said about prior generations who valued relationships and who someone was so much that they chose to discipline themselves to not have specific conversations. My grandmother always advised against conversations revolving around religion, sex, and politics. Why? Because most people cannot separate a person and who they may vote for, or a person and who they may love, or a person and how they may choose to connect to God. For all of the criticism that we place on prior generations, one thing can be said. Generally speaking, they knew how to behave with integrity and class, both of which have seemingly flown out the window over the last several decades. And frankly, they knew who they were. When you know who you are, you're able to see, perceive, discern other people. But everyone is so confused about who they are nowadays because no one minds their own business. Everyone has their nose in what everyone else is doing, and comparison is the thief of all joy. Everyone is out here willing to do anything and everything just to receive an ounce of validation. So it's no wonder that no one trusts anybody else. One thing that we can at least do to help lead us into a more positive direction is to take advice from one of the last generations of class. Discipline yourself to not have conversations about religion, sex, or politics. You might find that you genuinely like some people. Anyways, if you have a green card, there are some upcoming policy shifts taking place this year. One change coming is that if you are a green card holder and you also own a business, you will not qualify for SBA loans. The loans will now only be available to those who are U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals. Another rule has been added by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which stipulates that biometric data will need to be collected upon entry and departure from the United States. This rule being implemented is a milestone towards efforts to mandate the entry and exit biometrics and strengthen the security of the United States. The next rule is that refugees are only admitted temporarily at first and must be reviewed again after 1 year in the country. This is all part of the green card application process. New applications are being reviewed all the time, and with that may come legal challenges and calls for guidance. But it's better to be aware. I would just like to pause for a moment and say I am beyond grateful that I'm a US citizen. And I personally have mixed feelings about all of these crackdowns on knowing where people are at all times. I would like to give some friendly advice for those who are also US citizens and also not big fans of the government tracking you, your face, and your everything. As a US citizen, when you travel within the country, you do not have to take pictures when you go through security checkpoints. And I don't think this is information that a lot of people know. You are by law able to opt out. When you travel internationally, you also do not have to take pictures. You do not have to give your fingerprints or anything else. I recently also found out that you can opt out of those giant X-ray turning machines. This machine allegedly puts a year's worth of radiation into your body. However, I've heard that you can opt out of it. It may annoy the TSA agents more because they will have to do a physical pat down. However, we're all against technology taking our jobs, right? So the next time you travel, feel free to say no. We have now switched our clocks again, and there is also a new bill to hopefully end this ludicrous practice. A new House bill titled the Daylight Act of 2026 is yet again proposing to end the twice yearly clock changes. It needs to be passed through the House and then through the Senate and then to Trump to be finalized as a law. Here's hoping it works this time. During his campaign, Daddy Trump made a big stink about improving the prices of medications for many Americans. Since the beginning of the year, many of the drug manufacturers that signed deals with the Trump administration to lower their drugs have in fact increased their prices. Now, Trump does have his own platform, Trump RX, where drugs are being sold at lower prices. However, there is a limit to the drugs that are actually being distributed. According to 46 Brooklyn, a drug research firm, around 1,000 drugs have gone up in pricing since January. Some drugs have gone down in price, but not enough to have the impact that people hoped for. In Kansas, a new bill has been pushed forward that would allow renters in Kansas to pay their rent in installments as long as it's paid in full on time. The bill has been proposed as an effort to improve affordability for struggling tenants. It's also meant to give renters the same flexibility granted under federal law to homeowners who pay their mortgages in multiple payments. Generally speaking, the cost of renting in Kansas is low. However, between October 2024 and October 2025, rents increased by 14%. The average yearly rent increase in most states is anywhere between 3 to 5%, so that is a drastic increase. It seems to be a nice effort. I wouldn't so much call it a gift, though, because a gift would be creating a law that would bar rent increases above a certain amount annually. But hey, I live in California. So, what do we really know about housing here? Now we're going to head overseas. Obviously, the war in Iran has taken center stage for most people. It rages on, and we are continually told that it won't last longer than a few weeks. However, that has increased from 2 to 4, now being floated as maybe up to 8 weeks. It's noted that even though the 8 weeks is longer than their initial 2 to 4 week hopes, if this whole thing is completed in 2 months, that is insignificant compared to all of the evil that has sprouted from this place over the last several decades. Everything we hear from the White House and Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth in particular, is that we are achieving all of our goals. Iran has lost the majority of its firepower. Israel and America make a gravely destructive team, and we're winning. We all know that the supreme leader was killed within the first hour of this operation, and his son was named. His son, Moshtaba, was speedily voted into power, and it's been reported that he's been wounded from one of the strikes. As we've stated before, every time someone new is voted in, Israel places a timed target on their head. So it's only a matter of time. Maybe next week we'll be on to the next person who's on the top of the hit list. As of today, it's known that many servicemen have lost their lives due to this war. Deaths are an unfortunate part of this war, and we are so grateful for their service in protecting us up until their last breath. Now, news in Israel. It's been released that Israel decided that they were going to proceed with taking Ali Khamenei out in November 2025. Now, people, if the decision was allegedly finalized in November, that means that the decision was actually made to do it far before then, probably for years at this point. But it became a possibility with a high likelihood of support and success on November 4th, 2024. And now that this story has been released, Bibi and Trump's New Year's Eve celebration makes so much more sense. The initial timing was said to have been proposed for mid-2026. However, plans were moved up when the protests broke out in Iran. Protests are rarely just sprouted up out of nowhere, but we'll continue with the story. Post-protest, Israel became concerned that Iran would preemptively strike Israel and or the United States. The same story is being told here in the US. Listen, I'm not saying that Iran was or was not going to strike the US and or Israel. Frankly, Iran striking Israel was far more likely than Iran striking the US. I think Iran was content to continue their terrorism here and there while they built their little bombs until they had something they thought would be able to take Israel out. But do I buy the whole, well, we had to strike them because they were going to strike us because of the protests? Unlikely. Now, I'm also not saying that I'm not in support of us striking them, whether or not they were days or weeks away from striking us. Frankly, if this happened on January 21st, 2025, I would have been just as delighted. All I'm saying is all of these fluff pieces trying to defend why we had to do it now are kind of entertaining. And I could be wrong. Maybe Iran was days or weeks away. But let's be real. Israel for sure, and many Americans, and probably many other foreigners, quiet as it's kept, are beyond excited about the beginning of the end of the Islamic regime in Iran. So keep feeding us these stories if you really want, but it's not necessary. We owe everyone involved in this war a big thanks for having the balls to actually do it. Now, let's leave it to Israelis to make fun out of literally everything. Have you heard of the app Hooked? It's an app helping men and women find love in bomb shelters all over Israel. The app is actually not new. It's been around since before the war and was actually created to help people meet at different events. However, the creators of this app clearly thought, what better time to meet the love of your life than the moment that you are escaping potential death? And voila. So how does it work? People can now organize events in their bomb shelters, and when people show up, you can use the app to see other singles that you might match with. There's another app called Can I Shower, which was created to let people know the likelihood of having to flee to a shelter in the middle of having a shower. It also shows the amount of time since the last alert, the average time between alerts in the area, the total alert count, and also whether the number of alerts is increasing or decreasing. It is noted that this app is not a substitute for the Home Front Command guidelines. Life in Israel is something else. In central Israel, two fires broke out in two different residential buildings. Firefighters were promptly called to search the shelters and the apartments in the buildings. 17 victims were sent to the hospital due to smoke inhalation. Two people were injured and in moderate condition, and the others were lightly injured. Both fires are currently being investigated to understand the causes. That's all we have for you this week. Thank you all so much for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.